You ever stop and think about the world's greatest cities? London, Paris, Cairo, Shanghai. What do they all have in common? They're all built on the banks of a major river. Now that feels pretty obvious, right? But what if I told you there's a very precise, almost hidden pattern to all of this? A pattern that not only explains why we live where we do, but also holds a pretty serious warning for our future.
So let's get right into it. Why this universal obsession with rivers? It's got to be more than just having water to drink. There's a really powerful logic at work here, a kind of geographic blueprint that has guided human history for thousands of years.
And yeah, this is definitely not a coincidence. A really groundbreaking global study has uncovered a predictable, universal rule that dictates where we build our world. It's a pattern that just keeps showing up on every single populated continent.
And it has a name: downstream clustering. It's a simple idea, really. We don't just live somewhere along a river, we overwhelmingly choose to live in the lower parts of a river system, much closer to where it finally dumps into the sea.
The scale of this is just mind-blowing. Globally, most of our settlements are packed into the final 40% of a river's entire journey. Just think about that for a second. A huge chunk of all humanity is squeezed into this one very specific kind of location.
Now, when you think about it, it makes total sense. These downstream areas are where all the good stuff comes together. You get easy access to ocean trade, but you also have this liquid highway reaching deep into the continent. You've got flat, fertile land that's perfect for farming, and all kinds of natural resources just converge there. It's the absolute geographic sweet spot.
Now, this pattern feels so stable, so permanent, that it's really easy to just take it for granted. But here's the catch. Rivers aren't static. Throughout history, they've changed course, they've shrunk, they've flooded, and the consequences for the civilizations that relied on them have been devastating.
And this quote just nails it. Rivers aren't just the background scenery for human history. They are active players. They can fuel incredible growth, but they can also bring about total collapse.
Which brings us to our first case study, one of the great mysteries of the ancient world, the decline of the incredible Indus Valley civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization. For the longest time, we thought we had the story figured out, but it turns out the real story is written in the dirt and the riverbeds. For decades, the story you'd hear about the Harappan decline was all about drama, sudden invasions, big catastrophes. But new geological evidence is pointing to a much slower and, honestly, a more terrifying culprit: climate change. Okay, so check this out. The old story talked about foreign invaders or a mythical glacier-fed super river called the Saraswati that suddenly went dry. But the new climate story, which is backed by hard science, paints a totally different picture. The Indian summer monsoons started to get weaker and weaker. The real river they relied on, the Ghaggar-Hakra, wasn't some huge glacial river after all. It was fed by monsoon rains. And as those rains started to fail, the river became unreliable, seasonal. This didn't lead to a sudden collapse, but a slow, grinding process of people abandoning the cities and moving away.
You can see exactly how it went down. First, you have a nice, stable, wet climate. This allows the civilization to absolutely flourish, building these huge, amazing cities. But then the monsoon starts to weaken. The predictable floods they needed for their farms, they become erratic. The whole system is under enormous stress. And their solution? It wasn't to fight it. It was to adapt. They downsized their cities and started migrating east, literally chasing the rain. All right, now let's jump over to Central Asia, right into the heart of the legendary Silk Road. Here, you had these incredible oasis cities like Otrar that just bloomed in the middle of the desert. And just like the Harappans, their story has long been dominated by a single tale of violent destruction.
The story everyone knows is that the Mongol invasion in the 13th century just wiped these places off the map. It's a heck of a story for sure, but it completely misses the bigger picture. Because once again, the river was the real main character here.
Okay, so this is the crucial part. Yes, the Mongol invasion in 1219 was unbelievably brutal, but it was a kick to a society that was already down. For more than 200 years before the Mongols even showed up, the whole region had been suffering through a terrible drought. The irrigation canals, the absolute lifeblood of the oasis, were already being abandoned left and right.
And to get why, you just need to know two key ideas. During wet times, rivers go through aggradation. That's when they deposit a bunch of sediment, building up the riverbed. This raises the water level, which makes it super easy to divert water into your canals.
But during dry times, they incise. They start cutting deeper into the ground, and suddenly your canal openings are left high and dry.
And you can see this play out perfectly on a timeline. From the 6th to 8th centuries, it was a wet period. The river aggregated, and the oasis was booming. But then, a long dry spell kicks in. The river incised, the canals started failing, and the society began to shrink. The Mongol invasion? It happens right smack in the middle of this long decline. The system was already broken when they got there.
So, the takeaway is crystal clear. The climate set the stage. It weakened the entire civilization and made it vulnerable. The invasion wasn't the cause of the collapse. It was just the final bloody act in a very long play that was being directed by the river all along.
So what do these ancient stories of fading floods and failing canals actually have to do with us today? Well, pretty much everything. They're a warning flowing to us straight from history, and it's a warning that is incredibly relevant to our world right now.
Because remember that rule from the beginning, downstream clustering? We have built our entire modern world on the exact same geographic blueprint, and that concentration is our greatest economic strength, but as history clearly shows, it is also our greatest vulnerability.
And today, these downstream spots are facing a whole new set of threats. Climate change is cranking up flood risks. Sea levels are rising, threatening the very river outlets our biggest cities are built on. And all of us crowded together are putting massive pressure on water quality. For developing nations especially, the cost of trying to protect these huge, rapidly growing downstream cities is just becoming enormous.
At the end of the day, the ultimate lesson from the hairpins and the Silk Road oases is a simple one. The stability that we assume our rivers have, it's an illusion. They are dynamic, incredibly powerful systems, and what they're going to do next is never, ever guaranteed.
We have built our entire global civilization on this one fragile assumption, that our rivers are going to behave tomorrow just like they do today. But thousands of years of history, written in layers of silt and sand, tell us that is a really dangerous bet to make. The only question left is, are we actually listening to the warnings that are flowing right past our own front doors?